The last resort. The Kraxon High Council chamber hadn't seen such silence in 10,000 cycles. 15 species were represented in the vast amphitheater, their holographic forms flickering in the dim light of dying stars visible through the station's crystal dome. Each delegate bore the weight of their civilization's imminent extinction in their posture. Tentacles drooped, scales dulled, bioluminescent patterns dimmed. Supreme Commander Vexterra, her crystalline form refracting the starlight, finally broke the oppressive quiet. The void swarm has consumed the Centauri defense line. 30 billion lives gone in minutes. Her voice, usually melodious, carried the harsh edge of defeat. The quantum barriers failed. Our most advanced technology, useless against their adaptive capabilities. The delegates stirred, their collective movement creating a wave of light and shadow across the chamber. The void swarm had emerged from deep space 18 months ago, an endless tide of biomechanical horrors that devoured everything in their path. They didn't communicate, didn't negotiate, didn't show mercy. They simply consumed, adapted, and grew stronger. We have lost 67 systems, continued Vexterra, her holographic display showing the devastating progression of the swarm's advance. Our remaining fleet stands at 12% capacity. The Archon defense grid, our last major fortification, will fall within 20 standard days. Minister Killith of the Sorux Confederation, his scaled head adorned with the neural enhancers of his species, leaned forward. Then we are truly finished. The Combined Sciences Division has exhausted every technological avenue. Our weapons are ineffective, our shields meaningless. The swarm simply adapts. There is one option we haven't considered. The words came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Renlo of the Meridian Collective, one of the youngest members of the Council. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed with nervous energy as all attention turned to her. "Speak, Ambassador," Vexterra commanded, though her tone suggested she already knew and dreaded what would come next. We could contact the humans. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of protests and exclamations. Councillor Zexvi's tentacles writhed in agitation. The humans? The quarantine species? Have you lost your neural functions? They are savages, declared another delegate. Did we not all agree to contain them to their solar system after observing their endless conflicts? Their methods of warfare are primitive, brutal. Renlo's bioluminescence flared defiantly. Primitive. They developed faster than light travel while still using projectile weapons. They created quantum computing while still burning fossil fuels. Every species here evolved toward cooperation and peace, except humans. They evolved through conflict, and they never stopped evolving. Vexterra raised a crystalline appendage for silence. Ambassador Renlo, you were not present during the first contact assessment of Earth. We watched them split the atom and immediately use it for destruction. We observed as they turned their own planet's biosphere into a weapon. Their approach to science is unnatural. They don't wait for understanding before implementation. They break rules they don't even know exist. Exactly, Renlo pressed. The void swarm adapts to our logical, predictable methods of warfare. But humans, they still use kinetic weapons alongside antimatter drives. They deliberately employ chaos theories in their battle strategies. They've turned their greatest weakness, their divisive nature, into their greatest strength. Their military doctrine is incomprehensible because it's illogical by design. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence held a different quality. It was the silence of desperate minds entertaining desperate measures. Killith's neural enhancers pulsed rapidly, even if we wanted to contact them. And I'm not saying we should. The quarantine barrier around their system is our most sophisticated containment field. We designed it to be impenetrable. No, Renlo corrected, her patterns forming complex equations in the air. We designed it to be impenetrable to them. We can send a signal through. We've always been able to. The barrier was never meant to keep us out. It was meant to keep them in. Vexterra's crystalline form dimmed as she processed the implications. The humans had been contained not just because of their violent nature, but because of their potential. In the brief century since they'd achieved spaceflight, they'd advanced at an alarming rate. They approached problems differently, embraced risks that more evolved species would never consider, and most worryingly, they seemed to thrive on overcoming impossible odds. "If we do this," Vexterra said slowly, "we must understand what we're unleashing. The humans won't just help us. They'll change everything. Their ideas will spread. Their methods will be studied. The galaxy will never be the same." "The galaxy will never be the same regardless," Renlo countered. "At least with humans, we might have a galaxy left to change." The council members exchanged long looks. They had all seen the classified reports from Earth observation posts. Humans had turned their orbital defense platforms into slingshots for relativistic projectiles. They had weaponized their own stellar radiation belts. They had developed combat doctrines that incorporated calculated losses as tactical advantages, a concept so alien it had taken the Council's military analysts years to even recognize it as intentional. "Take the vote," Vexterra commanded, her tone heavy with finality. "Should we contact Earth?" One by one, the holograms shifted color to indicate their choice. Even those who voted against it did so with a resignation that suggested they knew what the outcome would be. In the end, the decision was made. "Send the signal," Vexterra ordered. "But remember this moment. We're not just asking for help. We're changing the course of galactic civilization. The humans will save us or destroy us, but they will certainly transform us." As the signal was prepared, Renlo's patterns formed one last comment. "The void swarm adapts to overcome its opponents. But humans adapt to overcome themselves. And they never, ever stop adapting." The message was simple. To the United Earth Defense Force, "The galaxy stands on the brink of extinction. We offer full disclosure of our technological archives in exchange for military intervention. The enemy adapts to all known forms of warfare. Time is critical. Awaiting response." The council chamber waited in tense silence. Minutes stretched into hours. And then, just as some began to lose hope, a response came through. It was shorter than anyone expected, and in its brevity lay a terror all its own. "Message received. Quarantine field detected. Calculating breach points. We're coming out. God help you all." The war was about to change. The galaxy was about to change. And humanity was about to show the cosmos why they had been contained in the first place. The price of pride. The quarantine barrier around Sol shattered like crystal struck by lightning. The Council's most sophisticated containment technology, designed to last millennia, collapsed in hours. But it wasn't the barrier's failure that terrified the watching aliens. It was the method. Humanity hadn't tried to decrypt the quantum fields or override the containment protocols. They'd simply calculated the barrier's resonance frequency and played it back at devastating amplitude, using their own planetary defense platforms as speakers. "They turned a shield into a musical instrument," whispered Caleth, his neural enhancers struggling to process the implications. "And then they shattered it with its own song." The human fleet that emerged was unlike anything the Council species had imagined. Where alien vessels favored elegance and efficiency, human ships looked like mobile fortresses, angular, over-engineered, and bristling with what appeared to be both energy weapons and primitive projectile launchers. Most disturbing were the huge cylindrical structures mounted on their flanks, whose purpose no alien analyst could determine. Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force didn't waste time with diplomatic pleasantries. Her hologram materialized in the council chamber, and the aliens found themselves face to face with humanity's chosen representative. She wore a simple dark uniform adorned only with rank insignia and campaign medals, her graying hair pulled back severely. "We received your technical archives," she said without preamble. "We've identified 14 immediate exploitable weaknesses in the Void Swarm's adaptation patterns. But before we proceed, You need to understand something. We're not here to win your war. We're here to end it. Vexterra's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. I don't understand the distinction, Admiral. Winning means achieving victory within established parameters. Ending means whatever it takes. Your species fight wars like they're solving equations. We fight wars like we're fighting cancer. We don't just attack the enemy. We change the environment that allows them to exist. The human fleet split into 3 battle groups, each adopting formations that seemed chaotic to alien tactical computers. As they approached the front lines, Admiral Chen continued her explanation. Those cylindrical structures you've been trying to analyze, they're not weapons. They're terraforming engines, repurposed for war. The Void Swarm adapts to weapons, so we're going to adapt space itself. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. Terraforming technology was sacred, used only for life-giving transformation. The idea of weaponizing it was sacred taboo. The first engagement with the Void Swarm began at the Archean defense grid. The alien observers expected a conventional battle. What they witnessed instead would haunt their nightmares for generations. The human ships didn't just fire weapons. They turned local space into a weapon. The terraforming engines activated, and suddenly vast regions of space began to change their fundamental properties. Gravity waves became solid walls. Radiation fields turned into deadly lattices. Vacuum itself seemed to acquire new properties that torn the swarm apart. Impossible. Braith killeth. They're breaking physics. No, corrected Admiral Chen, her voice hard. We're breaking the rules you thought physics had to follow. There's a difference. The Void Swarm, true to its nature, began to adapt. But for the first time, the adaptation worked against it. As its biomechanical forms evolved to cope with the altered space, the humans simply changed space again, and again, and again. It was warfare on a level that transcended conventional combat. But the true horror, or genius, of humanity's strategy became apparent in the battle's second hour. The swarm's adaptation patterns began to show signs of strain, its responses becoming erratic. You see it, don't you? Admiral Chen asked the stunned council. Your weapons failed because the swarm adapted to them. So we're not using weapons. We're making the swarm adapt so much, so quickly, that it's burning out its own adaptation mechanisms. Renlo's bioluminescent patterns flared with sudden understanding. You're not fighting the swarm. You're forcing it to fight itself. Exactly. Every adaptation requires energy, forces multiple adaptations, and eventually, the swarm's coordinated movement began to break down. Individual units started exhibiting signs of genetic instability. The human fleet pressed its advantage, herding the fragmenting swarm into specifically engineered spatial anomalies that forced even more rapid adaptation. In the council chamber, the aliens watched with a mixture of awe and revulsion as humanity demonstrated why they had been quarantined. These weren't just warriors. They were innovators who saw rules as suggestions and impossibilities as challenges. We'll have the Archean sector cleared within 10 hours, Admiral Chen reported clinically. But this is just the beginning. The swarm operates on biological principles, even if it's partly mechanical. And no one understands biological warfare like humanity. Because you used it on yourselves, Vexterra stated, her tone unreadable. Because we survived it, Chen corrected. Everything humanity knows about war, we learned the hard way. We're not proud of our history, but we're not ashamed of using it to save lives. As if to punctuate her words, one of the human ships launched what appeared to be a simple missile at a dense cluster of swarm units. Instead of exploding, it released a cloud of engineered bacteria that began literally eating the swarm's biomechanical components. That's barbaric, whispered a council member. That's survival, Chen replied. And speaking of survival, we need to discuss the terms of our continued assistance. Humanity has no intention of returning to its cage once this is over. The council chamber fell silent. They had known this price would come, but facing it directly was another matter. They had unleashed humanity out of desperate need, and now they would have to live with the consequences. But as they watched the void swarm, the unstoppable, unsurvivable void swarm, being systematically dismantled by human ingenuity, they realized something profound. Perhaps the galaxy needed humanity's chaos as much as it needed their order. The price of pride was being paid in full. The question now was, what would the galaxy look like when humanity finished reshaping it? Warriors from a broken world. The Meridian Observation Station had never hosted so many council species at once. They gathered around holographic displays, watching humanity's war machine in action with a mixture of fascination and horror. But it wasn't the ongoing battles that held their attention. It was the human command center that had been permitted to broadcast its operations for the first time. Unlike the sterile, orderly command centers of the council races, the human tactical room was chaos incarnate. Officers argued openly about strategy. Multiple simulations ran simultaneously, many deliberately contradicting each other. Screens showed everything from quantum probability maps to ancient historical battles. And at the center of it all, Admiral Chen was allowing an aide to question her decisions in front of her entire staff. "Your species operates on consensus," Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez explained to the alien observers. "We operate on conflict. Every plan is attacked from every angle before it's implemented. We assume we're wrong until proven right." The aliens watched as a young human officer slammed her fist on a tactical table, challenging the superior's strategy. Instead of punishment, she received immediate attention. Her alternative plan was dissected, modified, and within minutes, incorporated into the overall strategy. "But how can you maintain unity with such discord?" Killeth asked, his neural enhancers pulsing with confusion. Rodriguez smiled. "Unity doesn't mean uniformity. Earth has over 300 active military traditions, each with its own philosophy of warfare. We don't try to standardize them. We synthesize them." On the main display, a new battle was unfolding. Human ships had surrounded a massive void swarm cluster, but instead of attacking, they appeared to be failing. Ships drifted out of formation. Energy signatures fluctuated wildly. To the aliens, it looked like a disaster in progress. "Watch," Rodriguez said quietly. The void swarm, sensing weakness, surged toward the apparently vulnerable human fleet. But the moment it committed to the attack, everything changed. The drifting ships snapped into perfect formation. The energy fluctuations resolved into a synchronized pattern. What had appeared to be chaos was revealed as an elaborate trap. "You baited them," Renelo realized, her patterns shifting with excitement. But the swarm should have adapted to such a strategy. "They adapted to the strategy they thought they saw," Rodriguez corrected. "We've been feeding them data about our tactical doctrine for days, letting them build adaptation patterns. But it was all disinformation. We don't have a doctrine. We have thousands of them, and we switch between them constantly." The battle unfolded like a dance choreographed by a mad genius. Human ships employed tactics from Earth's ancient naval warfare alongside hyperspace maneuvers that violated what the Council considered possible. When the swarm adapted to energy weapons, the humans switched to kinetic strikes. When it adapted to physical impacts, they deployed gravitational weapons. When it adapted to those, they used chemical warfare. "Your approach seems inefficient," one of the council members observed diplomatically. Rodriguez barked a laugh. "Efficiency is predictable. Predictability is death. We learned that lesson on Earth long ago. The most successful military commanders in our history were often the ones who did what their enemies considered too stupid to attempt." A new hologram appeared, showing the overall strategic situation. The void swarm's advance had not only been halted but reversed. Yet the human fleet's movements seemed to make no strategic sense. They were leaving gaps in their lines, concentrating forces in seemingly random locations, and ignoring what appeared to be obvious targets. "You're not seeing the full picture," Rodriguez explained to the bewildered aliens. "Those gaps, they're not gaps, they're funnels. We're not just pushing the swarm back, we're hurting it. Every apparent mistake is a calculated move to manipulate their adaptation patterns. As if to demonstrate his point, a massive section of the swarm suddenly found itself trapped in what the humans were calling a spatial meat grinder, a complex intersection of artificial gravity wells, radiation fields, and weaponized space-time anomalies. The swarm's attempt to adapt to one threat pushed it directly into another and another in an endless cycle of forced evolution that was literally tearing it apart. This is why we survived on Earth, Rodriguez continued, his voice softening. Our world tried to kill us countless times. Predators, plagues, natural disasters, our own wars. Each challenge forced us to adapt. But unlike the swarm, we learned to adapt creatively. We don't just evolve to overcome threats. We evolve to transcend them. The alien observers watched as human ships deployed what appeared to be primitive nuclear weapons alongside quantum phase disruptors. The combination should have been meaningless. The technologies were separated by centuries of development. Yet somehow, the interaction between these disparate forces created effects that defied conventional physics. We call it technological synthesis, Rodriguez explained. Most species develop technology in a linear fashion, discarding primitive solutions as they develop more advanced ones. We keep everything. A stone axe and a fusion bomb are both tools in our arsenal, because we never know when the primitive might prove more effective than the advanced. The display showed a new tactical overlay, revealing the true scope of humanity's strategy. What had appeared to be random concentrations of forces were actually forming a vast, complex pattern. A web of overlapping fields and forces that was slowly but surely unraveling the swarm's very nature. You see, Rodriguez said softly, we're not just fighting the swarm. We're teaching it fear. Every time it adapts, we show it a new way to die. We're not trying to outthink it. We're trying to break its will to continue. The alien observers exchanged troubled looks. The concept of psychological warfare against a supposedly mindless enemy was disturbing enough, but the implication that humans had weaponized evolution itself was somehow even more terrifying. Your species, Renlo said carefully, treats war as an art form. Rodriguez shook his head. No, we treat survival as an art form. War is just one of our mediums. As if to emphasize his point, a new alert sounded through the command center. The swarm had begun exhibiting signs of something unprecedented. Retreat. Not tactical withdrawal, but genuine flight. The unstoppable force that had nearly conquered the galaxy was running from the species it had never meant to face. The price of victory was becoming clear. The galaxy had gained protectors, but it had also gained teachers. And humanity's lessons would reshape civilization itself. The art of savage science. The emergency session of the Scientific Council was called not to discuss defeat, but to comprehend victory. The galaxy's foremost minds gathered to analyze what humans casually called basic tactical innovations. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about technological progress. Dr. Emma Harrison, Earth's chief of military sciences, stood before the alien scientists, her hologram surrounded by displays showing human weapon schematics that seemed to defy logic itself. Her presentation wasn't just about technology, it was about philosophy. You've all been asking how we defeated the swarm's adaptation capability, she began, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of human scientific tradition. The answer is simple. We stopped trying to be better than them. Instead, we became more unpredictable than they could adapt to. The display showed what appeared to be a primitive railgun mounted alongside a quantum phase disruptor. The aliens' confusion was palpable. Your species abandoned kinetic weapons centuries ago, stated first theorist Zixtal of the Quantum Sciences Division. They're inefficient, crude, and therefore unexpected, Harrison interrupted. The swarm evolved defenses against energy weapons, against quantum effects, against spatial distortion, but physical impact. That was so primitive it wasn't even in their adaptation library. She brought up new schematics, weapons that combined ancient chemical propellants with antimatter catalysts, missiles that carried both nuclear warheads and temporal distortion fields, armor that used both quantum shielding and physical titanium plates. We call it retrotech integration, Harrison explained. Every technology has weaknesses, but those weaknesses often don't overlap. A defense against energy weapons is useless against a tungsten rod dropping from orbit. A quantum shield can't stop a shotgun blast. By combining technologies from different eras, we create hybrid weapons that force multiple adaptations simultaneously. The alien scientists watched in stunned silence as she displayed battle footage. Human ships firing salvos that began with laser pulses and ended with masses of superheated pellets. Drones that deploy both EMP bursts and clouds of corrosive chemicals. Combat robots that carried both plasma rifles and combat knives. But the energy requirements, protested another scientist. The logistical complications are irrelevant if the strategy works, Harrison cut in. You're thinking like scientists. We think like survivors. Efficiency is secondary to effectiveness. She brought up new data. The analysis of the swarm's adaptation patterns during the recent battles. The graphs showed increasing instability, mutation rates spiraling out of control. The swarm's greatest strength was its ability to analyze incoming threats and develop countermeasures, so we gave it too much to analyze. Every human weapon system is deliberately designed to create maximum confusion in their prediction algorithms. The display shifted to show the interior of a human warship. Unlike the clean, specialized designs of alien vessels, every surface served multiple purposes. What looked like structural supports doubled as backup weapon mounts. Maintenance corridors could be repurposed as missile tubes. Even the ship's waste recycling system could be converted into a chemical weapons delivery platform. This is how we survived Earth, Harrison continued. Our planet never gave us the luxury of perfect solutions. We had to adapt to everything from ice ages to nuclear winters. We learned to use every resource, every advantage, no matter how crude or desperate it seemed. She highlighted a particular weapon system, what appeared to be a massive electromagnetic pulse generator cobbled together from salvaged alien technology and human industrial equipment. This device shouldn't work, she admitted. By your scientific standards, it's an abomination. It violates 12 different engineering principles, but it does work because we didn't ask if it should. We only asked if it could. The alien scientists began to understand. Humanity hadn't just developed technology. They had developed a completely different way of thinking about technology. Where other species sought perfection, humans embraced imperfection and turned it into an advantage. Your greatest weakness in fighting the swarm, Harrison explained, was your devotion to theoretical purity. You tried to find the perfect counter to their adaptation capability. We didn't. We just threw everything we had at them, all at once, and kept changing the mix until something worked. She brought up the final piece of data, the analysis of the swarm's retreat. The biomechanical entities weren't just running. They were degrading. Their adaptation mechanisms had been forced to evolve so rapidly, in so many different directions, that they were literally tearing themselves apart. This is why we were quarantined, isn't it? Harrison asked quietly. Not because we were dangerous, but because we were unpredictable. Because we looked at your elegant quantum matrices and asked if we could use them to make better explosives. The alien scientists shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't wrong. But now you understand, she continued. The galaxy doesn't need more elegant solutions. It needs impossible ones. It needs people willing to break rules that aren't actually rules. It needs chaos theorists who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. The display showed a final image, a human ship using a repurposed mining laser to detonate a cloud of primitive gunpowder in space, creating a blast wave that carried thousands of microscopic nanobots toward the enemy. It was elegant and crude, advanced and primitive, brilliant and insane all at once. This is what we offer the galaxy, Harrison concluded. Not just protection, but innovation. Not just weapons, but new ways of thinking about what's possible. We don't just break rules. We prove they were never rules to begin with. The scientific council sat in silence, processing the implications. They had gained allies, yes, but they had also gained teachers who would challenge every assumption, question every certainty, and find possibilities in impossibilities. The age of theoretical purity was over. The age of savage science had begun. When prey becomes predator, the void swarm's retreat had become a rout. Across the galaxy, the once unstoppable force was fragmenting, its biological and mechanical components turning against each other as humanity's relentless assault continued. But in the council chamber, the mood was far from celebratory. Victory had come at a price none had anticipated. Admiral Chen stood before the assembled representatives, her hologram cast in the light of a dying star, one of many casualties of humanity's scorched space tactics. "The swarm is finished," she reported, "but we need to discuss what comes next." The chamber was silent. The aliens had watched as humanity transformed their defensive war into an exterminatory campaign that defied comprehension. Entire regions of space had been rendered uninhabitable. Quantum fields had been twisted into weapons that would take centuries to dissipate. The laws of physics themselves had been bent until they nearly broke. "You did more than defeat them," Vexterra said quietly. "You hunted them, like prey." Yes, Chen's admission was unapologetic. Because that's what we are, predators who learn to hunt things bigger than ourselves. On Earth, we didn't just survive. We became apex predators on a planet full of monsters. When something threatened us, we didn't just defeat it. We ensured it could never threaten us again. The display showed the full extent of humanity's campaign. They hadn't just pushed the swarm back. They had systematically destroyed its ability to exist. Engineered viruses attacked its biological components. Quantum weapons unraveled its mechanical parts. Space itself had been turned into a weapon against it. "Your methods." Caliph began, his neural enhancers flickering with distress. "The damage to spacetime itself will heal," Chen interrupted. "Eventually. But the swarm won't. We made sure of that." She brought up new data, plans for the future that made several council members recoil. Humanity wasn't planning to return to its quarantine. Instead, they proposed a complete reorganization of galactic defense. "We're establishing monitoring stations throughout the galaxy," Chen continued. "Early warning systems, rapid response fleets, and yes, weapons platforms. We're going to ensure that nothing like the swarm ever threatens this galaxy again. You're proposing to become our protectors." Rendelo realized, her patterns shifting rapidly, "but also our supervisors." "We're proposing to teach you how to protect yourselves," Chen corrected. "Your civilizations have achieved incredible things. Your science, your culture, your unity, they're remarkable. But you've forgotten something crucial. Peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace must be defended, sometimes violently." The display shifted to show human training facilities already being constructed. Academies where alien species could learn Earth's military doctrines. Research centers where human scientific chaos could merge with alien precision. Cultural exchange programs designed to teach the galaxy how to think like survivors. "We're not going to rule you," Chen assured them. "We're going to teach you everything we know about survival, about adaptation, about turning weakness into strength. It's yours. Because the next threat might be worse than the swarm. And when it comes, the galaxy needs to be ready." The council members exchanged glances. They had thought victory would mean a return to normalcy. Instead, they were being offered a revolution. "Your species," Vexterra said carefully, "seems to have planned this from the moment we contacted you." "Of course we did." Chen's smile was wolfish. "You put us in a cage because you feared what we might become. But you never asked yourselves what we were becoming in that cage. Every simulation, every war game, every strategic plan we developed, they were all preparing us for this moment." She brought up one final display, a map of known space overlaid with humanity's proposed defense network. It was comprehensive, aggressive, and unmistakably aimed at making humanity an indispensable part of galactic civilization. The quarantine taught us patience, Chen continued. It taught us to plan, to prepare, to think in terms of centuries rather than years. You thought you were containing a threat. Instead, you gave us time to become exactly what the galaxy needed. Guardians who understand that peace comes through strength, and that strength comes through struggle. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some argued for accepting humanity's offer immediately. Others warned of the cultural contamination that would follow. But underlying every argument was a simple truth. The galaxy had changed. The age of peaceful isolation was over. "We're not asking permission," Chen said finally, silencing the debate. "We're offering a choice. Accept our help and learn to defend yourselves, or watch as the next threat proves that peace without strength is just surrender waiting to happen." As if to emphasize her point, a final piece of data appeared, long-range scans showing something massive moving at the edge of known space, something that made the swarm look primitive by comparison. "That," Chen said quietly, "is why we can't go back to our cage. That is why the galaxy needs to learn what humanity knows about survival. Because the universe is not kind, and peace is not guaranteed. The only guarantee is this: whatever comes next, humanity will face it. The question is, will we face it alone, or will we face it together?" The council looked at the scans, then at each other. They had wanted saviors. Instead, they had gotten teachers, protectors, and perhaps something else. A mirror showing them what they might need to become to survive in a universe that was far more dangerous than they had imagined. The age of innocence was over. The age of humanity had begun.